cooking some food can be a really great thing to do. But only if you know what to do. That's why you're watching Cooking with Stu.
Hi, welcome back to Cooking with Stu. Meat in a loaf? The very thought probably brings disgust to your brain. Well, that's probably because the only kind of meatloaf you've ever experienced was some ketchup-soaked concoction created in a cafeteria somewhere by a woman wearing a hairnet. Well, I'm going to be showing you how to make really good meatloaf today. Not only really good meatloaf, but also mashed potatoes. Because you should eat mashed potatoes when you eat meatloaf. Let's take a look. Alright, let's talk ingredients. So you can't have meatloaf without meat. We're going to be using 1 tube of ground beef, lean, and 1 tube of pork sausage, also light and lean. Now, here at Cooking with Stu, we're all about using leftovers, so we'll be also using this leftover butt of bread made previously in the last episode of Cooking with Stu. We'll also be adding a can of spinach, no salt added, really important, and a can of tomatoes, diced tomatoes. Not only those things, but also 2 eggs will also be necessary, and a package of meatloaf seasoning. I actually prefer dry onion soup, but I couldn't find any at the store. It's actually harder to find than you'd think, so we're going to be using that. I also like to put in this minced garlic in pretty much everything I make, so we'll be putting some of that in there as well. And you will also need a casserole pan to put everything in, and a meat thermometer to make sure that your meat is properly cooked. And we'll also be using this spoon. And for our baked potatoes, we're going to be needing a couple of potatoes, 3 or 4 good sized ones, maybe more. I don't know, it just depends on how big they are. And I always like to throw in a sweet potato into my baked potatoes just because they're good. And we'll also be using some butter, some of this country crock here, and I like to put garlic in my potatoes as well. The utensils you might need, I really like this pan with this pot here, and it has this top that locks in place and has these holes that you can empty the water out with. I think this pot right here is probably one of the best kitchen investments I ever made. And a potato masher. It comes in really good and handy for mashing potatoes, way better than a spoon or your hand. Okay, so to get started, we're going to go ahead and get our potatoes going. It's a good idea to, get things in a certain order when you cook them, so that everything comes out at the right time. Potatoes take a long time to cook, so we go ahead and start them first. Make sure they're good and rinsed pretty well. They're gonna be cooked pretty well, so you don't have to scrub them or anything. But you do want to get any kind of sediment or something that might be on there. Next, get a chopping block like this one here, and an extremely large knife. You're gonna want to cut your potatoes pretty good. Now, notice how I'm cutting here. Keep the point end of your knife down and bring it down. That's the best way to cut any kind of vegetable. Don't just slam it down or saw it or something like that. Just press it straight down and bring it down like that. good. Have your pot handy, and as you cut your potatoes, just throw them in there. You want to cut them into pretty good size. I mean, you know, not too small, but not too big. Just big enough, because potatoes don't cook very well. They take forever, and you don't want them to be in big pieces, because we don't want to spend like 3 hours boiling potatoes. We want everything to kind of come out at the same time. Oh yeah, and if you get any bad spots, just cut them off. Throw them away. See, there's another one. Don't want to eat that. That's like a part of a new baby potato that was trying to grow. And finally, our sweet potato. The sweet potato will give our potatoes a slightly orange tint and flavor. Well, not an orange flavor, but oh yeah, you want to cut that off. That's gross. So it should look something like this. I perhaps used too many, perhaps a potato too many, but nothing we can do about it now. Go ahead and fill your pot up with water. And, you know, hopefully that'll be okay. And put it on the stove. And get that sucker boiling. You might want to put the lid on. At this point, you should also preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Okay, now we can start on the meatloaf. As I stated in our previous episode, if you're a horrendous mess like me, you should do this kind of stuff in the sink. Get your metal bowl, put it in your sink. Now, take your tube of meat, doesn't really matter which one first. Go ahead and open it up. And squeeze it out into your bowl. And take your tube of sausage. And cut it open and squeeze it out into your bowl. Now these are both really cold, but they're actually not that cold. Most of the time they've been in the freezer or something and they're just too cold to do this with your hands. But anyway,
We start mixing them up together, just like this. Get them good and mixed up together, so we're kind of having a cow pig party in our bowl here. Don't lose any of it. Alright. Now, take your butt of bread here. Now what you're going to want to do is just kind of crumble it up. It should be pretty dry at this point and crumbly because, you know, it's a week old or so, a couple days old. And just really, you know, get the crumbs in. Now, if you don't have bread, you can also use like Ritz crackers or something like that. Any kind of bread, substance, carbo, whatever will work. You know, this is kind of where the loaf part, I guess, comes from. So yeah, get it all kind of mixed up and then start trying to mix it in. I kind of like to leave some big pieces in there. Just it tastes better to find, you know, these big meat-soaked hunks of bread when you're eating it. So you don't have to crumble it completely. I mean, we're not trying to. I mean, if we were gonna do it if we were gonna really crumble it really good, I mean, you might as well just be pouring flour in here. We want it to kind of have some bread consistency left. Alright, so get it all kind of mixed in there. Pretty good. Pretty thorough bread meat consistency. Now we're going to want to add some spinach. I like to put spinach in most stuff I make just because it's really very tasty. And it's kind of watery in there, so you're going to want to pour out the water as much as possible because you don't want your meatloaf to be like liquidy. So just kind of, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here. You just kind of squeeze it out, this hunk of spinach, as much as possible. If you have a strainer, you can put it in that. You know, just get as much of that liquidiness out of there. This is going to give our meatloaf a really cool green tint. Oh, now get our spinach mixed in there really good. Spinach has most of the vitamins that you need on a daily basis, so I like to eat quite a bit of spinach. Alright, that looks alright. That looks pretty good, I guess. Next, we're gonna need tomatoes. Our no salt added tomatoes. So we'll open it with a can opener. I'm sure you need me to just demonstrate this part for you. What I like to do is not, these have liquid in them too, I like to just not open it all the way. And then just kind of, we'll move this, tip it out, let as much of the juice out as possible. Because we don't want a whole bunch of liquid. Just squeeze it out, just as much of that whole tomato sodium bath as possible. Alright, and put them in here. As I said before, a lot of people just put a whole bunch of ketchup into their meatloaf, which I find really awful. This will substitute for that ketchup that's normally in meatloaf. Most dishes I cook seem to be better when I add a can of diced tomatoes. They're only like 50 cents, so I keep 2 or 3 cans of them available all the time. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now we're gonna add our eggs. These, you need an egg or 2 in your meatloaf for structural integrity. When they cook, they hold the meatloaf together really well. So, gotta have the eggs. I imagine they kind of soak in to the bread, and that's how that works. I use my spoon for this part. Make sure those eggs are in there really good. I love the sound it makes. It's probably my favorite part of making meatloaf. Alright, looks good to me. Last step, meatloaf seasoning. Make a little hole here in the middle, just to make it easier for yourself. Pour that shit in. Get your seasoning really well mixed in there. Alright, it should look something like this. Now it's time for the loafing. I guess, oh yeah, we were gonna put garlic in this. A spoonful of minced garlic is always a good idea for whatever you're cooking. Alright, now it's ready to be formed into a loaf. Alright, so we have our casserole pan and our bowl of meatloaf fixins, or fixin' to be meatloaf. Just put it all in there. Should slide right in there. And if you'll notice, there's no way we could cook it like this. What you're gonna have to do is take your spoon, use the back of your spoon, and just kind of start forming it around into a loaf. Just kind of smooth the top, get it nice and kind of round shaped. This takes a little finesse and practice, but it's really not that hard to form it into a meatloaf shape. And it's really important. I guess just for presentation's sake, but also later on, hopefully in a later episode, I'll be teaching you how to make meatloaf sandwiches. And so you're going to want this to be in a shape where you can slice it and it'll sort of maintain a loafish shape so that you can have nice pieces of meatloaf rather than, you know, soup. So get it kind of in a good kind of dome loaf shape. Just like that. That's pretty good. What I like to do, I didn't even mention this actually when we were going through the ingredients, is on the top I like to add a little bit of cracked pepper. Actually a lot of bit of cracked pepper. Just crank it out right on top. This kind of helps to balance out the flavors, I think, because there's a lot of pork in this, and the tomatoes and the spinach kind of tend to have a lot of salt in them, although they were unsalted. It's just sort of a salty flavor, so putting a lot of pepper on here kind of helps balance out the flavors. And it looks nice on top. Ta-da! So now, you're ready to put it in the oven. So let's pop her in here. Beef and pork need to be cooked to about 170 degrees. So it should probably stay in there for maybe 45 minutes to an hour. But use your thermometer, check it every once in a while, and like I said, it needs to be at like 170 degrees for, you know, a while, or you could get a parasite. You've been warned. Did you forget that we were also making mashed potatoes? They've been sitting on the oven or the stove this whole time, but they're still pretty hard. This actually should be boiling, and it doesn't hurt to add a little salt, because for some reason salt makes water boil faster. So yeah, these should be boiling until they're soft. Alright, our potatoes are... Whoa! Potatoes are nice and squishy. So go ahead, put your lid on. Make sure it's locked really nice and good. And pour out the water. Now we're going to take our handy dandy potato smasher. Just start smashing them up. Probably also need a spoon for this. Okay, if we were to eat these right now, they just would be really dry, and so that's why you need to add some butter to it. And quite a bit, in fact. I like to put like at least that much in there. Oh, and another ingredient I forgot. Milk. Just throw a little milk in there. That'll also help get the potatoes tasting really nice and creamy. Can't believe I forgot the milk. That was probably more than we needed, but that's okay. Alright, now your potatoes should be feeling nice and smushy. Lastly, we're gonna want to add my favorite, the minced garlic. Nice big spoonful of garlic in there. There you have it. Some nice creamy mashed potatoes. Now all we have to do is wait for our meatloaf. Alright, it's been about 45 minutes, and as you can see, our meatloaf is right at 170. Or just about. We're gonna let it cook cool a little bit, and then we'll be ready to try it. And there you have it, delicious meatloaf and mashed potato.
Thanks for watching Cooking with Stu. In the next 2 episodes, I'll be showing you what you can do with the leftovers of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Until then, send me an email. I guess I'll put it right here at some point. This right here. And eat some meatloaf. And go check out my other video on how to make bread.